I don't know if you're anything like me, but there is something in your body right now that you have not said out loud yet. Something you have noticed and filed away. A heaviness that is there before you have done anything. A coldness that the blankets do not fix. A feeling in your legs that you have been calling age, because age is the easiest explanation, and because naming it something else would mean having to do something about it. I know that feeling. I lived inside it for years, and then I got my legs back. At 99 years old, I walk my garden every morning. I cook my own meals, and I have not used a railing for anything other than preference in over 2 decades. I am going to tell you exactly what I did, and I have saved one thing for the very end of this. The thing that is not in any drink or any supplement or any prescription. And I need you to stay with me until we get there, because it is the reason everything else worked. My name is Margaret Eloise. I was born in 1926. I have lived through rationing and the years when doctors made house calls on bicycles, and the years when they stopped coming at all. I have lived through polio scares and the long stretch when no one talked about their health because suffering was simply something you got on with. I watched medicine do extraordinary things in my lifetime. I watched it discover what blood pressure was, what cholesterol was, what a statin could do. And I watched it miss ordinary things too. The things that show up in the body years before any test catches them. The signals most doctors are too busy to listen for, and most patients are too quiet to describe. What I know at 99, in a way I could not have known at 60 or even 85, is that the body does not wait for a diagnosis before it asks for help. It starts asking years earlier. In most cases, I have come to believe, it asks quietly first, and most people are too busy or too frightened to hear it asking. I say this with love, not judgment. I was one of those people once. My legs nearly stopped working when I was in my late 70s. Not from an accident, not from a surgery gone wrong. From years of small neglect that added up the way small debts add up, quietly and then all at once. I am going to tell you what I did to get them back. I am going to tell you what I drink every single morning, the same thing for over 20 years now, and what it has done for the circulation and the strength and the steadiness that my doctors told me I was unlikely to recover. I have saved the most important thing for the very end of this, the thing that is not in any drink or any supplement or any prescription. And I need you to stay with me until we get there, because it is the reason everything else works. But first, I want to tell you about Harriet. Harriet was my neighbor for 31 years. She was sharp and funny, and she had a garden that made mine look like an apology. For most of those years, she walked everywhere, to the post office, to church, to my front porch for coffee every Tuesday morning, without fail. Then gradually, so gradually that none of us marked the exact moment it changed, she stopped walking to things and started driving to them instead. Half a block to the mailbox, 2 driveways over to return a dish. We teased her gently. We called her the queen of her automobile. She laughed along with us. We should not have laughed. What was happening inside Harriet's legs was not laziness. It was not preference. The circulation that had quietly carried warm blood all the way down to her feet and back for 7 decades was beginning to fail. The vessels were narrowing. The nerve signals were getting interrupted somewhere between her brain and her feet, the way a phone call breaks apart when the connection is poor. She could feel her legs. She just could not fully trust them anymore. And because none of us knew what we were seeing, we made it a joke instead of a conversation. I remember visiting her one afternoon and sitting with her while she tried to put her shoes on. She had to lean forward 3 times before she could hold the position long enough to tie the lace. She did not mention it. She had stopped mentioning things by then. And I remember the look on her face, not pain, not distress, just a kind of quiet resignation, as if her body had become something that happened to her rather than something she lived in. That is the look I have never forgotten. That is the look I was determined never to have myself. By the time Harriet was 82, she needed a walker. By 84, she was using a wheelchair for anything more than a short hall walk. She was not in pain, she told me once. That was almost the hardest part. There was nothing dramatic to point to, nothing that had declared itself an emergency. Her legs had just gradually, incrementally, quietly stopped being legs she could rely on. And because it had happened slowly, she had adapted slowly. And by the time she understood what had been lost, most of it was already gone. I stood at her kitchen window with her one afternoon, looking out at her garden, which someone else was tending now. And she said something I have carried with me every day since. She said, "Margaret, I think I stopped listening to my body a long time ago. I think it was trying to tell me something, and I just kept waiting for it to say it louder. It was trying to tell her something. And there are signs, specific and real and visible, that it uses. I want to walk you through them now, because every single one of them appeared in Harriet years before her legs gave out, and no one caught them in time. Heaviness in the legs that has no clear cause. Not tired after exercise heaviness. The heaviness that is there when you wake up, before you have done anything. The kind that makes getting out of bed feel like lifting something unfamiliar. Harriet mentioned this for years. She called it her old bones acting up. She thought it was age. I thought it was age. We were wrong. I almost dismissed it in myself too. I am so grateful I did not. Here is what that heaviness actually means. When circulation to the legs is beginning to decline, blood pools in the lower limbs overnight instead of being returned efficiently toward the heart. The vessels that should be contracting and releasing, moving blood back up, have weakened. By morning, there is a low-grade congestion in the tissue of the legs and feet, and the body registers that congestion as weight. Think of a drain that is beginning to slow. The water still disappears eventually, but there is always a little standing in the basin now when there never used to be. It is not your bones. It is your blood not moving the way it should. What I did when I noticed this in my own legs was start moving before I did anything else in the morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before anything. 10 minutes of walking in my kitchen, back and forth, not for fitness, to pump the blood back into circulation before the day put any real demands on my legs. That habit has never left me. I still do it every morning, 20 years on. Right now, before we go any further, I want you to think about your own mornings. Not Harriet's, yours. Does getting out of bed feel heavier than it used to? That is worth holding on to as we keep going. Coldness in the feet that warmth does not touch. Not cold because the floor is cold or cold because it is winter. Cold in July with socks on. Cold in a warm bath that heats the rest of you and leaves your feet behind. Cold in a way that makes you reach for another blanket at night and wonder why it never quite helps. Harriet complained about this for years. We bought her thermal socks for Christmas one year. She thanked us. They did not help, because the problem was not outside her feet. The problem was inside them. When circulation is compromised, the blood that carries warmth deep into the small vessels of the feet is simply not arriving in sufficient supply. The feet are the farthest point from the heart, the last stop on a route that is becoming unreliable. And persistently cold feet are one of the earliest signals that the route is starting to fail. It is not about how warm your socks are. It is about whether the warmth your body generates is reaching its destination. If it is not reaching your feet, it is worth paying attention to where else it might not be reaching. What I did was add movement specifically designed to force blood into the lower legs. Not just walking, but calf raises throughout the day, standing on my toes and lowering back down while I waited for the kettle, while I stood at the sink, while I talked on the telephone. Small pumping motions that the calf muscles are specifically built to perform and that directly assist the blood in returning up from the feet. I did them 50 times a day in sets of 10 without ever setting aside special time for them. They cost nothing and they change things. There is a third thing to look for, and this one almost nobody catches because you have to know you are looking. I remember standing behind Harriet once while she was at her kitchen sink, and I noticed the skin below her knees. Not a wound, not a rash, something quieter than that. The skin had taken on a thin, almost papery quality, and along her ankles there was a faint brownish color, like old tea staining on the inside of a cup. I did not know what I was seeing. I remember thinking it was just age. It was not just age. When blood circulation in the legs is poor and blood is pooling rather than moving, the small vessels under the skin begin to leak tiny amounts of red blood cells into the surrounding tissue. Imagine a pipe that has been under low pressure for too long. The seams start to weep, just barely. Not enough to notice right away, but enough to leave a mark. Those leaked cells break down over time and leave behind deposits of a pigment called hemosiderin, which shows on the skin as a brown or rust-colored staining, usually at the ankles and lower shins. The shininess comes from the skin thinning, as it is deprived of the nutrients that healthy circulation delivers. It is the body printing a map of what is happening underneath, and most people never read it. After every bath, I looked at my legs. Not a glance, a real look. Both legs from the knee down, the color, the texture, the feel of the skin when I ran my hand across it. If anything looked different from the week before, I noted it. That habit of looking took 2 minutes, and it caught things early enough to address them. The fourth sign I want to tell you about is one Harriet described to me years before I understood what she was saying. She used to talk about a walk she would take to the end of her road and back. A short walk, a nothing walk, she called it. But she told me she had started stopping partway through, not because she was tired. There was an ache in her calves that came on after a few minutes of walking, and if she stopped and stood still for a moment, it would ease and she could carry on. She thought she was simply getting older. She thought stopping and starting was just what older legs did. Picture a car engine that runs smoothly at idle, but begins knocking the moment you press the accelerator past a certain point. The engine is not broken at rest. It is only when you ask more of it that the shortage shows itself. That is exactly what is happening when walking brings on a calf ache that rest relieves. The working muscles of the calf call for more blood to fuel the effort. The narrowed vessels cannot deliver it fast enough. The muscle cramps in the gap between what it needs and what is arriving. Rest reduces the demand. The ache eases. Most people take the easing as reassurance. What it actually is, it is a direct signal that the system is being outpaced, and it is called intermittent claudication. If walking triggers a consistent ache or cramp in your calves that rest relieves, please do not write it off as age or fitness level. Tell your doctor. Describe it precisely. The walking, the ache, the rest, the relief. Those 4 things together mean something specific to a physician who knows what to listen for. What I did when I noticed my own legs beginning to fatigue on familiar routes was shorten the walks and double the frequency. 3 short walks instead of 1 long one. That is still what I do. I have never stopped. The 5th sign, and this is one I watched develop in Harriet so slowly that I did not notice it until it was already well along, is what happens to the ankles and feet after you have been sitting still for an hour or more. I remember visiting her on Tuesday afternoons and watching her lift herself out of her armchair and reach for the footstool she kept beside it. Her ankles had swollen during the sitting. Her feet felt tight in her shoes by mid-afternoon in a way they did not in the morning. She kept the footstool there because elevating her legs gave relief. It did. But we were both treating the relief as the solution when what the swelling was trying to say was something else entirely. When circulation cannot keep up with the demands of stillness, when the vessels that should be returning blood upward from the feet while you are at rest are not doing their job well enough, fluid accumulates in the tissue of the ankles and feet. Elevation manages that swelling. The way tilting a glass moves water away from one side, but it does not fix what is making the water pool in the first place. What I did was stand up for 2 minutes every hour when I was sitting for long stretches. Not a full walk, just standing, shifting my weight, doing a few calf raises before sitting back down. 2 minutes every hour. That kept the pump working. That was enough. Now I want to tell you about the drink, because people who hear me describe my mornings always assume they already know what it is. They picture the same thing most women our age reach for first thing. The coffee, the kettle going on before anything else, the cup that means the day has started. That is not what I reach for. And when I tell people what I actually drink, the first reaction is almost always the same. That is it? Not even close to what they expected. But here is what 20 years of the same cup every morning has done to my circulation markers and my leg strength in numbers my own doctor cannot explain. So let me tell you what is in it and why. I do not start my morning with coffee. I start it with water. Warm water with a full squeeze of fresh lemon, a small pinch of turmeric, and a teaspoon of raw apple cider vinegar. I have done this every single morning for more than 20 years, not because a doctor told me to, because I paid attention to my body when I started, and I noticed what this drink was doing over time in a way that was impossible to argue with. Here is what each part of it actually does. The warm water starts circulation moving before any demand is placed on the body. After a night of stillness, the vessels are at their most contracted, and the warm water is a gentle signal to begin opening. It is the simplest thing I do, and I believe it matters more than most people realize. The lemon is not there for flavor. Fresh lemon juice contains compounds that support the elasticity of blood vessel walls, and vitamin C is one of the building blocks the body uses to produce collagen, which keeps those walls supple rather than stiff. Stiff vessel walls are a significant part of why circulation declines with age. What keeps them from stiffening is collagen. What helps produce collagen is vitamin C consistently delivered over years, not taken once, but taken every morning as a habit the body can count on. The turmeric is there because of what it does to the blood itself. Think of blood moving through a small vessel the way water moves through a garden hose. When the water is clean and the hose is clear, it flows without effort. But when the water starts to thicken, when there is too much material suspended in it that wants to stick to the walls, the flow slows, the walls narrow, and eventually the pressure drops at the far end. That far end in your body is your feet. Curcumin, the compound that gives turmeric its color, has been studied extensively for its effect on circulation and inflammation. Research from the University of Maryland and replicated in multiple studies since has found that it meaningfully improves blood flow in smaller vessels, exactly the vessels that supply the feet and lower legs. I use just a pinch, not a supplement, not a capsule. A pinch in a warm cup of water with lemon every single morning. The apple cider vinegar is there because it helps the body manage blood sugar in the first hour after waking, which is when blood sugar tends to spike in people whose glucose regulation is not ideal. And blood sugar and circulation are tied more closely than most people understand. Elevated blood sugar damages blood vessel walls over time in exactly the same way that acid slowly erodes a surface. By keeping the morning blood sugar response steadier, the vinegar is protecting the vessels the lemon is working to keep supple. This drink costs less than $1 a day. I make it in the same cup every morning. My doctor has seen my circulation markers and my leg strength over the past 20 years, and she has no medical explanation for the trajectory they have taken. I have an explanation. I paid attention and I was consistent. 20 years of 1 cup every morning. That is not medicine. That is just showing up for yourself before the day starts. But here is what I have saved for last, because it is the thing the drink cannot deliver and the morning walk cannot deliver, and no doctor has ever been able to prescribe. The most important thing I know about keeping a body working well at the end of a long life is this: you have to want to be here. Not in a vague way, in a daily, deliberate, specific way. You have to wake up and have a reason that is bigger than your own comfort or discomfort to put your feet on the floor. Harriet lost that, I believe, before she lost her legs. She lost the daily conviction that her presence in the world was required by something or someone outside of herself. And I watched her fade in the way that people fade when they are not quite sure they are still needed. I have a garden I tend. I have letters I write by hand to people who still read them. I have a neighbor's child who comes on Thursday afternoons, and I teach her to bake the same bread my mother taught me. These are not hobbies. They are the reasons my legs are still under me at 99. Not the lemon water, not the calf raises, not the attentive looking at my own skin. Those things maintain the body. Purpose is what keeps the body willing. Science has begun to catch up with what I have known from watching people live and die for nearly a century. People who maintain a strong sense of daily purpose, who are needed by others and know it, show slower rates of physical decline, better circulation, lower levels of the inflammation markers that damage vessels and nerves, and measurably better outcomes after illness than people who feel their usefulness is behind them. This is not sentiment, it is measurement. It is what happens inside a body that has a reason to keep working. Let it go, the years you did not pay attention, the signs you missed, the doctor appointments you skipped, the swelling you explained away. Let every bit of that go. The body you have right now, today, is the only one you can work with, and it is more willing to respond than you have probably been told. I am proof of that, not because I am exceptional, but because I started. I paid attention. I made the drink. I did the 10 minutes in my kitchen every morning. And I found the Thursday afternoons that reminded me that I was still useful in the world. Tonight, before you sleep, look at your legs. Really look. Below the knee, the color, the texture, the temperature. Tomorrow morning, before your coffee, make the warm water with lemon. Just those two things. And when you are ready, find your Thursday afternoon. Find the person or the place that needs you to show up, because that is where the deepest keeping going begins. You are not too late. You are not too far along. You are here, which means your body is still asking you to work with it. I think that is worth something. I think it is worth everything. Take care of yourself. Take care of your legs.